Welcome back to the DRH Show. I'm delighted to have a pioneering figure in holistic medicine and integrative healing. He is an orthomolecular psychiatrist and holistic healer known as the Fasting Guru by the New York Times, with decades of experience uniting ancient wisdom and modern science. As the founder of Essene Order of Light and Tree of Light Foundation, he promotes live foods therapy to support healing from chronic illnesses. He has authored 9 books and tours globally, sharing his teachings on spiritual nutrition and conscious living. Dr. Gabriel Cousens, thank you for joining us today.
Well, Dennis, I'm very pleased to be part of your program. What I usually like to do is start with a prayer for merging the heart and the mind, which
Yes.
is key for understanding mental health. Okay, here it is. Shimikud, Kudasha Brihu, Ushinate, Bi Ilulaya, Chemuke, Babavke, Biuda, Bishem Kozrael Kolam, Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Cousens. Thank you. That's an interesting way to kick off the program. I'm also interested about your background, your trajectory in life. So give us a snapshot of how you ended up doing what you're doing.
I don't know about a snapshot. It's like more of a video, but okay. I began, I went to a place called Amherst College, and I was in biochemistry, and I published papers in biochemistry at that time, biochemistry and biophysics. And I went to Columbia Medical School, and about my third year, I said, gee, this psychiatric stuff is really interesting. It was the least thing I thought I would be involved with. And so then I became a 3-year training in psychiatry, but also as a 2-year Boston Family Therapy Institute. I do a lot of family therapy because people are part of a context, as well as doing a lot of couple therapy. Then, after graduating and doing my residency, 3 years of training, as I went into practice, I saw, wow, people's minds aren't working right. So I have to kind of deal with their blood sugar imbalances and all those other kinds of imbalances that affect their thinking. Then I can work with them on an intrapsychic level. So it kind of evolved in that way. That's a very brief summary of that.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you really do, what you're known for is spiritual fasting, obviously, among other things. So can you explain to us what spiritual fasting is and how does it differ from other types of fasting, of course?
Excellent question. Actually, we have a spiritual fast coming up June 1st in the Dominican Republic. Now, spiritual fasting, part of my work is rebalancing the neurotransmitters of the brain, because I saw that a lot of people were out of balance. Their neurotransmitters were not in order. And so that's how I got a little bit into what I call orthomolecular psychiatry as well. The use of vitamins and minerals to help balance and update the neurotransmitters of the brain. What I discovered was when I had people fast, because we go in fasting retreats, it seemed to happen very naturally just through the fasting. That the fasting mechanisms created a reordering of the brain neurotransmitters, so people got a lot more balanced during this 7-day cycle of fasting. And wow, that was really interesting to me, because this is a very simple way to do it. And then I would also follow with some orthomolecular work following that. So that's how the spiritual fasting fits in. Now, what about the word spiritual? Well, what I did also find, which research at Harvard has validated, is that when people are meditating, it regrows the brain, because the brain's shrinking by the way people are living. It actually literally expands the brain and activates key centers that have shut down. Well, that's pretty important when you're trying to get people's brains to work right. So the spiritual fasting, adding the meditation, began to have an accelerated rebalancing. Literally, there's 3 ways to get the brain to grow. One is meditation, which is part of the spiritual fasting. 2 is fasting, and 3 is exercise. These have been the 3 ways that have been proven in a lot of research around the world to actually increase the size of the brain and rebuild the brain. And that's pretty exciting. So spiritual fasting with meditating, and we're doing yoga once a day, meditating twice a day, is a way to really update it. Now, as you mentioned, I've been involved in spiritual life for a while, and in several traditions. The yogic tradition, the Essene tradition, which you mentioned, and also Native American. I am a Native American sun dancer, what we call eagle dancer. Now, in each of those, there's a rebalancing and reorganizing going on. So part of my work, again, is using these ways to kind of bring people back into a normal brain physiology. And then, to tell you the truth, many issues that people have mentally, which they think are mental issues, turn out to be orthomolecular issues. And that's how I kind of evolved it. So I mix it. I mean, I do family therapy, I do individual psychotherapy, but before I do that, I have to repair the body and the brain so it can respond at its highest octave. And the spiritual fasting with the meditation, with the contemplation, and the other things we do really accelerates that process of bringing people back into balance, both neurotransmitters, but physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So it really accelerates the process in a good way. That's why I do 2 spiritual fasts a year, to give people a chance to accelerate that process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Cousens. I also want to hear about your experience, because obviously you've done a lot of travel. So how did your time in India, while you were studying Swami Muktananda and later Kabbalistic teachings, how did it influence your philosophy on health and healing?
That was more at the beginning of my process. I was already a psychiatrist, and I began to explore what we call Kundalini. I was doing some research with it with Dr. Lee Sanella, who wrote Kundalini Psychosis or Transcendence, and I became really the world's leading expert in Kundalini and mental health. In that process, it led me to understanding about Kundalini and the whole yoga tradition, which has a lot to do with balancing. So I spent 7 years with Muktananda. I was like the physician for a few thousand people in India and in different places where he traveled around the world. And it gave me a very, very in-depth understanding of the interface between the Kundalini unfolding process as well as the mental health process and working with the interface. And he actually assigned that to me in the sense that anybody has any difficulty, you go to Dr. Cousens. So I learned a lot with thousands of people of how this process works.
And also, of course, you're the founder of Essene Order of Light. So what are some of the key teachings and how do they relate to your current work? And also, I understand, Dr. Cousens, that you're also involved with Tree of Life Foundation. So tell us about these two.
Okay, so the Tree of Life Foundation, which I founded, is a nonprofit foundation where we, for 25 years, had a total comprehensive program where people could come and heal themselves, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. It was a spiritual program, and also psychological and individual treatments. Okay, that being said, the questions that you asked about the Essenes, and the Essene principles, which I'm most interested in this question, really had to do with living a healthy lifestyle. And that healthy lifestyle, at the inner core of the Essenes, who we know lived in Qumran in Israel, but also all over the world, involved a vegan, and the inner core even 80% to 100% live food. And as I studied their process with that, and they did healthy living, they did meditation, they did prayer, they did service, they did their gardening, a very, very integrated approach. It was a explicit holistic approach, which I learned a lot from. And we adapted that holistic approach that helped people come into balance in every aspect of their lives. And that's really how that worked and how they evolved. So the Tree of Life Foundation was heavily influenced by Essene understanding. And I kind of took it a little further. I talked about the sevenfold peace, which they alluded to. That's peace with the body, because you have to have a healthy body to hold the energy of a healthy mind. Peace with the mind, which is more about meditation. Peace with the family, because interactions, family interactions, marital interactions, and just general interactions are key for evolving spiritually. In the yogic tradition, we talk about Tantra, not sexual Tantra, but Tantra as it was originally taught in the Shiva Sutras, which has to do with the fundamentals of a healthy relationship. So that fit right in with my family therapy work, and helping that grow in that way. The Essenes were, a lot of people think they were just men in, kind of in retreat, but actually, when they looked at Essene communities, women were very much involved in those communities. And some people feel that not that Jesus was an Essene, but he was raised in the Essene community. His cousin John the Baptist wasn't Essene. Okay. But the point of making, it's a lifestyle that supports spiritual life. So I talked about family, and then we talked about community, right relationship with community, and then right relationship with all cultures. So that takes you into nature, which the Essenes really practice very, very well. And also all the different cultures around the world. I work in a lot of different cultures. I mentioned Native American, but I work with a lot of African cultures. 5 different countries in Africa, but they're all different. And so all cultures, and then spiritual ecology. So we do a lot of organic, veganic farming, and we also have organic, veganic farms in different countries in Africa. And then finally, peace with God. So it's a whole lifestyle where it's all coming into harmony with all those different aspects of being a full human being.
Mm. So essentially, it's kind of a blend of teaching from ancient teachings, and also with veganism and spiritual nutrition. And,
Yes.
okay. And also, Dr. Cousens, I've also learned that spiritual fasting can also be used as a treatment for certain medical imbalances like type 2 diabetes and hypertension. So can you tell us more about this?
You studied my material well. Very good. Thank you. Along the way, in 2007, actually, I, at our clinic in the Tree of Life Foundation in Arizona, I began to explore diabetes. type 2 diabetes, and by accident, I said by accident, type 1. So we had a program. And after 3 weeks on a live food, 100% live food, 100% vegan diet, 61% of the type 2 diabetics, and these are people coming with blood sugars, normal blood sugar, just for frame of reference, is around 60 to 75. Okay, first thing in the morning. These are people where their blood sugar was so high, on the average was over 250. This is very high. I took really, really severe diabetics. Some were on medication, some weren't. In 3 weeks, 61% who weren't on insulin were healed totally, blood sugar less than 100, and 96% were off all insulin, and 26 of the people on insulin were healed. Now, after 3 weeks, the healing continued. Now, what shocked me is the type 1 diabetics. 20% of the type 1 diabetics, and these are people classically diagnosed, they all were already pre-diagnosed before I saw them. I didn't actually do the diagnosis. That was part of the research. 20% healed, which is shocking.
Absolutely.
All on this diet.
Mm-hmm.
And all they had to do was continue this diet, and over a period of time, they could modify it a little bit over, months. And it was really remarkable. So I wrote a book, There Is a Cure for Diabetes, with all my data in it. So I got involved in curing diabetes, nutritionally, which was not an intent, but life isn't always how we intend it, right? It just happened. So I do a lot of work, and that's how I actually started in Africa. I mean, I have programs all over the world, but I went there primarily, to set up diabetes prevention centers and treatment centers in these 5 different countries. And what happened was there's a much greater demand for being able to feed people and get fresh water. So we ended up digging about 50 different wells in 5 different countries and creating veganic farms where people took over the farms and began feeding people, and they began training. This is part of the plan. Teenagers would come work on the farms, and they would become empowered and trained in how to do veganic farming. It's all a weave, and that's really what we're talking about.
And I've also learned, Dr. Cousens, that you've led spiritual fasts for about 40 years now. So has your approach evolved over time, or is it more constant, like blending of other philosophies?
Oh, it's definitely evolved over time.
Mm-hmm.
We learn new things each time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the climate's different things happen. But the basics still hold. After a few days, people go, after 10 to 48 hours, they move from glucose metabolism to fat metabolism, ketones, and that begins to rebalance. And their blood sugars often come to balance in 3 or 4 days, meaning less than 100, and off insulin. It really accelerates that process. I have to be very careful when people come on insulin, because their insulin needs drop so quickly. By 3 days, usually most people are off insulin. And then, so you have to watch it so they don't get insulin shock, which has never happened. And then people continue to get stronger and better and healthier. And so they're very encouraged to lead that lifestyle. So the 7-day fast is a really beautiful cycle, because by day 5, 6, and 7, or day 6 and 7, depending on the person, they're feeling great. So what's the greatest motivation? Not somebody telling you this is good. I feel good. That's the greatest motivation.
But I suppose for people who are watching this, they're also interested to hear some sort of recommendation from you. Like, what do you think is the diet that is most powerful, that most powerfully heals the planet, or what is the diet that best uplifts health and healing when it comes to physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual body? Do you have any um, sort of recommendation for that kind of diet?
First, I want to honor you for asking such good questions. So thank you, Dennis.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Now, the diet that's best for healing the planet is a vegan diet.
Hmm.
That means no fish, chicken, dairy, flesh food. Okay, that's the diet that's best. It doesn't stress the planet at all. It's 4 to 6% of the stress on the on the planet. But it's also the most healthy diet. It's the most rejuvenative diet. It's the diet that takes the least amount of ecological stress on the planet. So all these things together make it the best, really the best diet. And you get more energy. So funny story. Okay. So as a Native American sun dancer, I Native Americans aren't too hot, they aren't too well informed about an organic, veganic diet. Okay, it's meat and so forth, buffalo steak, and so I got. They kind of joked. I was the butt of a lot of jokes first year, but what they did notice is I was the only one out of 80 people who you're supposed to go 4 days without food and water. I was the only one out of 80 could go 4 days without food and water. The same thing happened the second year and the third year. And each year they began to include more vegan food. Why? Because they see results. Here's this guy, he's not even Native American, who's doing better than anyone else. Okay. What's he doing? Oh, he's vegan. We didn't use the word vegan, it was just non meat, fish, chicken, or dairy. And so more and more of the Native Americans begin to do that because after the 4 day Sundance, then you have a feast. So by the fourth year, most of the food was veganic. It was kind of funny, but why? Because people saw it worked. Here's a guy who was the oldest guy. I was 60 at the time. It was about 22 years ago. He's by far the oldest. The only other guy had even made it to the 4 days without food and water was 23 years old. Most of the people are a lot younger. So here's this guy older, having a really good time dancing with no problems. What's he doing that's different? And then they looked at the diet, and then that inspired people because it worked. That's kind of the way it works, really. Now, we do know that people who are vegan, men who are vegan, live about 7.2 years longer, and women who are vegan live about 4.4 years longer compared to the average meat eating public. So the results are there. You do have more energy, you do have more vitality, and people notice that. So my current age is 82. Saying, hey, I'm doing 1,600 push-ups every 2 days. I'm doing sit-ups, pull-ups, and walking and Native American dancing, but Afro American dancing. I'm having a good time. When most people in their 80s are not exactly too physically active, and there are some who are. So we look at the results, and here's this wild guy doing African, American dance, which I don't know if you're familiar with. This is pretty active, okay, and doing fine with people who are 50 years younger. So it proves itself.
Okay. Well, I'm just amazed when you said you could do 1,600 press ups because I could only do 50 at a time. That's all I can do.
That's
I'm
pretty
trying to
good.
do
Now,
it.
mine is all at one time, 1,600 at one time.
Okay, wow, that's amazing. But moving beyond, the physical and emotional and mental and spiritual aspects of it, would you say that spiritual fasting can help someone find their true purpose in life?
Excellent. That's really the point of the fast.
Hmm.
When the mind is quiet, which happens when you're fasting and when you're meditating and when you're doing, my wife teaches the what we call Kali Ray Tri Yoga. When all those things are going on, you get a quiet mind. When you have a quiet mind, you're tuned into the cosmos about your purpose in life. We talk about it. We have kind of group meetings, 2 levels of group meetings each day, and people begin to explore once they get the first 2 or 3 days of the detox done. What's my purpose? What am I doing? So people start to get a clarity about their life purpose because their minds and bodies are clean enough that they can actually spontaneously begin to ask that question, which is a natural human question, as far as I'm concerned. Great question.
And of course, I understand, Dr. Cousens, that you've got an upcoming spiritual fasting retreat in the Dominican Republic
Right.
from the 1st to the 9th of June this year. So, what can people expect to experience during your retreat?
Well, what people often experience, I mean,
Mm.
I have just a side fact. I have a small group for people who are type 2 diabetics coming off their medication and their insulin and all that, oral medications. So people can expect that their blood sugars most likely are going to come to normal. But generally, big picture, they're going to expect a real upgrade in the quality of health and well being and clarity of mind. A lot of people say, wow, I can't believe how clear I am. So all that goes on. They're going to get more flexible. They're going to get happier because you're stimulating the kind of happiness neurotransmitters without going into the details of dopamine and serotonin and so forth. So all that goes on. So what they can expect is a sense of well-being, a sense of detox that finishes taking the well-being, a sense of more inner purpose, more clarity of mind, a quiet mind, because we always do these fasts in a kind of removed setting. So people aren't being disturbed by the outer world. Uh, and they can expect that a calmness of being, a strengthening of being, and also a lot of people have a lot of aches and pains. And, just their bodies are inflamed. Most everybody's body is inflamed. The brain is inflamed, body is inflamed. And so that inflammation goes significantly down. So the amount of body pain goes away too. I mean, again, at 82, I really don't have any inflammation. I don't have any aches and pains. And I was an American football player, and you got lots of injuries from doing that. So all that's going away with this whole lifestyle. And the fasting accelerates clearing the muscle and tendon aches and pains. So you get physically significantly less pain free. And then, your blood sugars are come to normal. Now, you mentioned high blood pressure before. About 95% of the people who come in with high blood pressure, even on medications, they come off their medication, but actually their blood pressure goes to normal because what happens with the fast is you reset the blood pressure genes back to normal. So 95% go back to normal, but they're reset back to normal, so they don't necessarily go back to high blood pressure after the fast unless they go back to really bad eating and living habits. Plus, a lot of chronic diseases go away. We get
Mhm.
90% people with osteoarthritis goes away. Goes away means pain free, no joint pain, inflammation.
Mhm.
So those are just more classic things that you see.
That sounds really like a holistic event. So for anyone who's interested, the link to that event will be on the description note. Now, it's lovely talking to you, Dr. Cousens, but before we wrap up, let's end on a lighter note with some quick fire questions to get to know you a bit better. So I've got 3 quick fire questions for you. The first one is, what were you afraid of as a child?
Interesting question. I had kind of a problem. I was fearless. I drove my mother crazy. We lived in Chicago, and I'd jump off at 4 years old, jump off the 2nd-story building onto trees. That's enough to drive your mother up a wall, right? So I didn't have a lot of fear. They're really honest for you. So that's the downside, because when you're fearless, you can get in trouble that way when you're 4 years old.
Okay. And what is your favorite word in another language?
My favorite word?
Word in another language. Favorite word?
Ahov, which is love.
And that, I suppose that's in Jewish.
Hebrew, yeah.
Hebrew. And if you hadn't been a holistic healer or a psychiatrist, what would you have pursued in your life?
Again, we all evolve. So I didn't really start in this direction, okay? I was more an athlete. I was offered a not osteopathic, but a ortho surgery practice. I was really good at orthopedics. Why? Because I had injuries with every joint in my body, okay? But I was really good at it. So I was literally offered an orthopedic practice graduating. So that's in the medical field, but way different than psychiatry, okay? If not, I probably would have been more of a social worker. Because I do a lot of community organizing in different communities. It's Native American, African, all kinds of different communities in the U.S.
Absolutely. And finally, the floor is all yours. What should people take away from today's conversation?
One message is, and that's why I keep repeating my current age of 82 times around the planet, is that we can get stronger, more flexible, and wiser with age. That's different than the myth that, you're getting weaker, more frail, and so forth. So that is really worth considering, that we can really have a good time at any age, and that's the message. We can get stronger, more flexible, more thoughtful, more brain function, and live a happier, fulfilled life at any age. That's a breakthrough message.
Yeah, that's a fantastic note to end on, Dr. Cousens. That's it for us. Your insights on spiritual fasting and holistic healing have been truly inspiring. It's been a pleasure having you here on the DRH show. Thank you.
Dennis, thank you. You did a great interview. And if people want to find out about the fast, they can go to Dr. Cousens Spiritual Fasting.
Thank you.
.co. Okay? Thank you. Take care. And blessings to everyone.